Jax's revenge domain.
The morning they announced our company's most profitable quarter in 15 years, my boss handed me a gift that made me want to throw it right back at his smug face. Not because it was offensive, because it was honest. "Hell of a year, Anthony," Charles Hoffman said, dropping a cheap plastic pen onto my desk like he was tossing spare change to a homeless guy. "Figured you'd need this to sign all those overtime sheets you've been turning in." "My name's Anthony Foster. I'm 49 years old, and I've been busting my tail for Pinnacle Systems for 15 years. That puts me in an interesting spot. Too young to retire, too old to start over somewhere else. I learned that lesson the hard way when I got out of the Army at 34 and had to prove myself all over again in corporate America." The pen had our company logo stamped on the side and "Excellence in Action" printed in tiny letters that were already starting to fade. Inside the cheap plastic packaging was a note card. "Keep up the good work, Charles," in his sloppy handwriting that looked like a teenager's. "I've got 2 kids in college. Sarah's a junior at State studying engineering, and Michael's a sophomore going pre-med. Smart kids, both of them. They get that from their mother. Linda and I split 3 years ago, but we're still talking, still working together to keep those tuition payments coming. $60,000 a year combined for both kids. That's more than some people make in a year. And it's money I write checks for every semester without fail, because that's what fathers do." Charles stood there with his arms crossed, waiting for me to say thanks like a good little employee. He's 35, got his MBA from some fancy East Coast school, and talks like every conversation is a business presentation. Been here 18 months and acts like he invented our entire operation. The guy wouldn't know real work if it bit him on his perfectly pressed khakis. "Thanks," I said. No emotion, just acknowledgement. He gave me this patronizing pat on the shoulder, the kind of touch that says "good boy" without actually saying it, and walked back toward the corner office they'd given him when he arrived. The same office that used to belong to Jerry Martinez, a guy who'd worked here 22 years before they restructured him into early retirement. I sat there staring at that pen, while the numbers from this morning's meeting echoed in my head. Record quarter, $4.2 million in net profit, best performance in company history. And I'm holding a piece of plastic that probably cost them $7 to buy in bulk. Around me, my teammates were opening identical packages. Same pens, different variations of the same meaningless message. "Great job this quarter. Here's to another big year. Stay sharp." Yeah, someone actually wrote that last one. I watched faces as people opened them, a few forced smiles. Most just shrugged and tossed them in desk drawers. But here's what really got me. Last month I'd been in the break room when Charles was on the phone with someone, talking loud enough for half the floor to hear. "Premium recognition solutions," he kept saying. "Top-tier appreciation packages." The guy was practically bragging about how much the company was spending to show employees we mattered. I opened my browser and looked up the product code on the pen packaging. Took me 30 seconds to find it online. Retail price, $11.99. Corporate bulk pricing from the manufacturer, probably $7 each, maybe less for large orders. Then I remembered something from last month's department budget meeting. Charles had made a big show of presenting the new employee appreciation vendor he'd personally selected. Premier corporate gifts, he'd called them. Best-in-class recognition solutions tailored for our corporate culture. I pulled up our internal finance portal. Senior managers get access to departmental budgets for planning purposes, so I could see where the money was going. I navigated to human resources, then employee programs. There it was, clear as day. Recognition and appreciation. Q4. Invoice, $38,400. Let me do the math for you. We've got 180 employees. $38,400 divided by 180 people equals $213 per person. But every single one of us got a $12 pen. Where did the other $200 per employee go? I felt something click in my chest. The same feeling I used to get in the service when things didn't add up on a supply manifest. When someone's numbers don't match reality, there's usually a reason. And in my experience, that reason is rarely innocent. I dug deeper into the vendor information. Premier Corporate Gifts, LLC had been approved by Charles personally. He'd written the business case, signed the contracts, approved every invoice for the past 18 months. The company address was listed as 2847 Cedar Lane, Unit 4B. That address nagged at me. I pulled up our employee directory and searched for Charles's emergency contact information. Every employee has to list a family member or close friend in case something happens. There it was. George Hoffman. Brother. Address: 2847 Cedar Lane. Unit 4B. The exact same address. Charles had been funneling company money to his own family's business. For 18 months, he'd been billing us for premium recognition packages and delivering dollar-store junk, while his brother pocketed the difference. I leaned back in my chair and stared at that cheap pen sitting on my desk. It wasn't just a gift anymore. It was evidence. Evidence that while I was working 55-hour weeks and stressing about tuition payments, some MBA punk and his brother were treating our employee appreciation budget like their personal ATM. This wasn't about the money, exactly. Hell, the pen itself didn't matter. What mattered was what it represented. After 15 years of doing my job, doing it well, helping build this company from 40 employees to 180, this is what they thought I was worth. A $12 pen, while they stole $60,000 a year from money that should have gone to actual employee recognition. I saved the vendor information to my desktop and closed the browser. Tomorrow was our quarterly all-hands meeting, where William Patterson would stand up front and talk about our shared success and team appreciation. Time to see how much appreciation was really worth around here. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the pen, my laptop, and a beer that I probably shouldn't have been drinking on a Tuesday. The apartment felt too quiet. It's been that way since Linda moved out, since the kids left for college. Just me and the bills, and the constant low-level worry about whether I'm doing enough, earning enough, saving enough. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. Dad, second semester invoices are due next week. Also need money for lab fees and books. Sorry. Love you. I looked at the amount. $1,847 for books and fees, on top of the $15,000 tuition payment due in 10 days. I'd been counting on a bonus this quarter to cover the gap. Instead, I got a pen worth less than a fast food meal. I texted back, "No problem, sweetheart. I'll transfer it tomorrow." Then I opened that vendor file again and started digging. 3 years of invoices. Same pattern every single quarter. Premium recognition packages billed at $200 to $300 per employee. Actual items delivered based on what people were showing me. $15 to $20 worth of cheap promotional junk. Charles and George Hoffman had been running this scam since Charles got here. The math was ugly. $60,000 per year, minimum. Probably closer to $80,000 when you factored in the special occasion packages for holidays and company anniversaries. Money that should have gone to actual bonuses, actual appreciation, actual recognition for people who'd been building this company since before Charles even knew we existed. I called Linda. We might be divorced, but some conversations you need to have with someone who knows you. Hey, she said. I could hear her TV in the background. How was your day? Remember that bonus I was hoping for? To help with the kids' expenses? Don't tell me they deferred it again. Worse, they gave me a pen instead. And I think I know where the bonus money actually went. I told her about Charles, about the vendor, about the numbers that didn't add up. Linda's got an accounting degree. She used to do the books for a small construction company before she went back to teaching. She understood what I was looking at. "Anthony," she said after I finished, "you need to be careful. These corporate types, they protect their own. You start making noise about this, it could come back on you. And if I don't make noise, it keeps happening. For how long? Until I retire? Until some other working parent gets screwed out of money they need for their kids?" She was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet. But I'm not going to pretend I didn't see it." After we hung up, I kept digging. Our company uses an integrated financial system where everything connects if you know where to look. Vendor approvals, payment, authorizations, delivery confirmations. Charles had signed off on every piece of this puzzle personally. The next morning was our quarterly all-hands meeting. These things are usually a mix of corporate cheerleading and financial updates. William Patterson, our CEO, does his best motivational speaker impression while middle management nods along like bobbleheads. I got there early and sat in the back. Not because I was planning anything dramatic, but because I wanted to watch faces when Patterson talked about investing in our people. The conference room filled up with the usual crowd: engineers, project managers, admin staff, a few of the sales guys who actually generate the revenue that keeps this place running. Charles walked in wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people here make in a week, took a seat in the front row like he owned the place. Patterson clicked through his slides with visible satisfaction. The numbers were impressive, I'll give him that. Revenue up 41% year over year. Net profit at $4.2 million, our best quarter in company history. New contracts signed. Market expansion, the whole 9 yards. We couldn't have done this without every single person in this room, he said, gesturing broadly at the crowd. Every one of you made this possible. People clapped politely. A few engineers in the back exchanged glances. We'd heard variations of this speech before, usually followed by explanations about why our compensation couldn't quite keep up with our productivity. Patterson clicked to the next slide. Looking forward. Compensation and benefits. Here we go, I thought. Cash bonuses will be deferred to Q2 pending board review, he announced. Market conditions require us to maintain conservative cash reserves for strategic investments. Same song, different verse. Bonuses deferred for the 4th year running. But the slide that followed was what caught my attention. However, we've made unprecedented investments in employee recognition and appreciation programs this year. More than ever before, we're committed to showing our gratitude for your dedication. I looked around the room. A few people shifted in their seats. Jennifer Walsh, one of our project coordinators, actually snorted quietly. She'd been here 8 years and probably got the same cheap pen I did. In fact, Patterson continued, our employee appreciation budget has grown by 200% over the past 3 years, ensuring every team member receives meaningful recognition for their contributions. That was my moment. I raised my hand. Patterson paused, probably surprised to see someone interrupting his victory lap. Yes, Anthony? I stood up. Not for drama, just because you can't ask serious questions from the back of a room full of people. I have a question about that appreciation budget. Of course. What's on your mind? You mentioned unprecedented investment in recognition. Can you give us some specifics about what that investment looks like in practice? Patterson smiled his practiced CEO smile. Absolutely. We've partnered with premium vendors to provide thoughtfully curated gifts, milestone recognition packages, performance awards. We're not just handing out generic corporate swag anymore. That's interesting, I said, pulling the pen from my pocket. Because this is what I received yesterday to mark our record quarter, along with everyone else in this room. I held it up high enough for people to see. I looked up the vendor invoice. We paid Premier Corporate Gifts $38,400 for what they called premium recognition packages. This pen retails for $12. You could feel the energy in the room shift. People were doing their own math now, looking at their own identical pens with new understanding. I also noticed that Premier Corporate Gifts is registered to the same address as Charles Hoffman's brother George. Same apartment number. Same zip code. The room went completely quiet. I could see Charles in the front row, his face going red, his hands clenched into fists. "So my question is," I continued, keeping my voice level and professional, "when we talk about unprecedented investment in appreciation, are we talking about actual employee recognition? Or are we talking about a corporate shell game where our recognition budget becomes someone's personal piggy bank?" Patterson's smile didn't waver, but his eyes did something I'd never seen before. For just a second, the polished corporate mask slipped, and I saw something sharper underneath. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Anthony. We take these concerns very seriously and will investigate immediately." The meeting lasted another 10 minutes, but nobody was listening to the agenda anymore. You could see people whispering, checking their phones, looking at their own cheap gifts with new understanding. As we filed out, Charles caught up with me in the hallway. His face was flushed, his voice tight. "You have no idea what you just did," he said quietly. I asked, "A question about numbers that don't add up. You embarrassed me in front of the entire company. I pointed out facts. If you're embarrassed by the facts, maybe the problem isn't the facts." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "This isn't over." "You're right," I said. "It's not." The next 48 hours felt like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. You could feel the structure starting to crack, but the real collapse was still coming. First sign something was happening. Charles's name disappeared from the morning email distribution list. Not removed with an explanation, just gone. Like he'd never been part of the leadership team at all. Second sign. Barbara Walsh, our CFO, started showing up on our floor. Barbara's the kind of person who doesn't waste time on casual visits. When she's walking around with her tablet and that focused look, it means someone's about to have a very bad day. She stopped by my desk around 10 a.m. Thursday. "Anthony, do you have a few minutes? I'd like to go over some of the information you brought up yesterday." We walked to conference room B, the windowless one they use for sensitive conversations, the kind of room where careers go to die. "I want you to know we're taking your concerns very seriously," Barbara said, opening a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. "But I need to understand exactly what you found and how you found it." I walked her through everything. The vendor invoices, the address match, the pattern of billing versus delivery. She took notes in precise handwriting, asked specific questions about dates and amounts, cross-referenced everything against her own files. "This isn't the first irregularity we've found," she said after I finished. "Your presentation yesterday prompted us to look deeper into several vendor relationships Charles has managed over the past 18 months. She showed me 3 other contracts: office supplies, IT services, facility maintenance, different companies, but all registered to variations of the same family addresses. Charles hadn't just been skimming the recognition budget. He'd been running a whole network of shell companies. "We're talking about $340,000 over 18 months, Barbara said quietly. "Minimum." I felt something twist in my stomach. While people are getting their hours cut and their bonuses deferred. While people are getting their hours cut and their bonuses deferred, she agreed. That afternoon, my phone rang. "Linda." "I've been thinking about our conversation," she said, "about you being careful." I changed my mind. "What do you mean?" "I mean screw being careful. You know what Sarah said when she called me yesterday?" She said she's thinking about dropping her internship this summer to work full-time instead. She's worried about money. Our daughter is giving up career opportunities because she thinks we can't afford her education. I closed my eyes. Linda, I didn't know she didn't want to stress you out. But Anthony, she shouldn't have to worry about that. Not when you've been busting your ass for 15 years for a company that just posted record profits. What are you saying? I'm saying burn it down. All of it. Make them pay for what they did. Friday morning, Charles didn't show up for the weekly department meeting. His office was dark. His computer access had been revoked overnight. When people asked where he was, management said he was taking some personal time. Nobody bought it. By lunch, word was spreading through the building like wildfire. Someone had seen security guards in Charles's office, boxing up files. Someone else heard raised voices from the executive conference room. Jennifer Walsh told me she'd seen Barbara escorting 2 people in suits, not our suits, outside suits, up to the top floor. Lawyers? I asked. Or investigators? Either way, Charles is done. The official announcement came Monday morning. Email to all staff. Effective immediately, Charles Hoffman is no longer with Pinnacle Systems. We thank him for his contributions and wish him well in his future endeavors. Standard corporate speak for we fired him, and if you ask why, we'll fire you too. But here's the thing about office buildings. They're like small towns. Information travels through the ventilation system. By noon, everyone knew about the vendor fraud. By end of day, people were sharing stories about other questionable decisions Charles had made, other contracts that seemed overpriced, other family connections that hadn't been disclosed. Tuesday morning, Patricia Morrison from HR called me into her office. Anthony, I want to apologize on behalf of the company, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. This should never have happened. Inside wasn't merchandise or corporate swag. It was a compensation adjustment letter. Back pay for bonuses that should have been distributed instead of stolen. A salary increase that brought me up to what I should have been earning all along. And a one-time payment labeled systemic oversight correction. Corporate speak for sorry. We let someone rob you blind for 18 months. The numbers made me blink twice. Enough to cover both kids' tuition through graduation. Enough to put money back into my retirement account. Enough to stop lying awake at 3 a.m. doing math in my head. This isn't charity, Patricia explained. This is what the budget should have supported all along. Charles wasn't just stealing from the company. He was stealing from every employee who deserved real recognition for their work. I signed the paperwork, but I had questions. What happens to Charles now? What about his brother? Charles won't be working in this industry again. Word travels fast in tech circles, and financial fraud isn't something companies overlook. As for George and the shell companies, that's being handled by law enforcement now. Law enforcement? When you steal from a company, it's embezzlement. When you set up fake businesses to bill government contractors, it becomes mail fraud, wire fraud, probably tax evasion. The FBI takes that seriously. I thought about Charles in his expensive suits, his smug smile, his patronizing shoulder pats. Good. Patricia leaned forward. Anthony, I need to ask you something. How did you figure this out? Most people would have just taken the pen and moved on. I thought about Sarah worrying about tuition money, about Michael studying for pre-med courses while working part-time jobs, about Linda doing the books for that construction company, showing me how to read between the lines of financial statements. You know what the Army teaches you? I said. It teaches you that when someone's taking care of themselves instead of taking care of their people, the whole unit falls apart. Charles wasn't taking care of his people. He was taking care of himself. And you couldn't let that slide. Not when my kids are involved, not when other people's families are involved. You don't steal food off someone's table and call it business. Patricia nodded. For what it's worth, the new recognition program will be managed internally. Real budgets, real oversight, Real appreciation for real work. I walked back to my desk, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not relief exactly, but something closer to justice. The cheap pen was still in my drawer, but it didn't look the same anymore. It had stopped being an insult and become evidence. Evidence that sometimes, when you stand up and point out what's wrong, people actually listen. Sometimes they even do something about it. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my favorite booth at Murphy's Tavern, the kind of place where working guys go to decompress after long days. Jerry Martinez, the guy who used to have Charles's office before they restructured him out, joined me for a beer. He'd heard about what happened through the grapevine. "You know what the best part is?" Jerry said, raising his glass. "Charles thought he was untouchable. MBA from some fancy school, family connections, knew all the right buzzwords. Thought us old-timers were too stupid or too scared to notice what he was doing." I took a sip of my beer. He wasn't wrong about the scared part. Took me 18 months to work up the nerve to say something. But you did say something. That's what matters. The aftermath had been more satisfying than I'd expected. Charles didn't just lose his job. He lost his entire career. Word travels fast in tech circles, and when you're known as someone who embezzles from employee recognition programs, doors don't just close, they get welded shut. Last I heard, he was working at a used car lot somewhere outside the city. George's fake vendor network collapsed when the FBI started digging. Turns out they'd been running similar scams with 3 other companies. The investigation led to federal charges for wire fraud and tax evasion. Both brothers were looking at serious prison time, but the real changes happened at Pinnacle Systems. William Patterson called an all-hands meeting 3 weeks after Charles got fired. No slides this time, no corporate cheerleading, just straight talk. "We failed you," he said, standing in front of the same room where I'd asked my question about the recognition budget. "We created a system where someone could steal from you for 18 months without oversight. That stops now. The new policies were comprehensive. Every vendor contract over $5,000 required 3-signature approval. All family relationships had to be disclosed in writing. Financial audits became quarterly instead of annual. And the employee recognition program? That got moved in-house, with full transparency on budgets and spending. More importantly, they started treating bonuses like what they actually are: earned compensation, not corporate charity." That first quarter after Charles left, we all got checks that reflected our actual contribution to the company's success. I used mine to visit Sarah at college, drove down on a Friday afternoon, and took her to dinner at a nice place near campus. She looked tired, but happy, buried in engineering textbooks and lab reports. "Dad, you seem different," she said over dessert, more relaxed. "Money stress will eat you alive if you let it. It's nice not worrying about next semester's bills for once." Is that all it was? Just the money? I thought about that question. No, it wasn't just money. It was about being treated like I matter. About knowing that 15 years of work means something more than a cheap pen and a pat on the head. Sarah nodded. "Like respect. Exactly like respect. I visited Michael the next week. Pre-med students don't have much free time, but we grabbed coffee between his study sessions. He'd heard the basic story from his sister and his mother. "Were you scared?" he asked. "When you stood up in that meeting?" "Terrified. But you know what scares me more? The idea that good people will keep quiet while bad people take advantage of them. Your mom and I raised you kids to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard," he said, echoing something I'd told him when he was 12 and dealing with a school bully. That night I called Linda. We talk more now than we did in the last 2 years of our marriage. Funny how removing financial stress can improve every other relationship in your life. "The kids are proud of you," she said. They've been telling their friends about their dad, who took down the corrupt boss. I didn't take him down. I just pointed out what he was doing wrong. Anthony, sometimes that's the same thing. Sometimes just speaking up is enough to change everything. She was right. And not just about Charles. The whole culture at Pinnacle Systems had shifted. People were more willing to ask questions, to push back when things didn't make sense. Management started listening differently, responding to concerns instead of dismissing them. Jennifer Walsh got promoted to department supervisor. The promotion came with a real raise and real authority, not just additional responsibilities without additional pay. She told me she'd been thinking about leaving before Charles got fired, but now she was excited about staying and building something better. 3 new hires joined our team, all experienced professionals who'd been laid off from other companies. Instead of hiring cheap labor and burning people out, we were investing in people who knew what they were doing. Novel concept. The pen that started it all is still in my desk drawer. Not because I use it, the thing barely writes, but because it reminds me of something important. When someone shows you what they really think you're worth, you have a choice. You can accept it and move on, or you can hold up a mirror and make them look at what they've become. I chose the mirror. Not because I'm particularly brave or smart, but because I've got kids counting on me and teammates who deserve better. Because after 15 years in the Army and 15 years in corporate America, I've learned that the worst thing you can do is let bad people get comfortable being bad. Last month, Patterson asked me to join the Vendor Oversight Committee. It's not a big promotion, doesn't come with a fancy title or a corner office, but it means they trust me to help make sure what happened with Charles never happens again. I said yes. Not because I want more responsibility, but because I want the next guy who tries to steal from working families to know that someone's watching. Someone who understands the difference between profit on a spreadsheet and putting food on the table. The cheap pen taught me something I should have learned years ago. Your worth isn't determined by what other people think you deserve. It's determined by what you're willing to accept. And I'm done accepting scraps while someone else gets fat off my work. Sometimes justice isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just a guy with 15 years of experience asking uncomfortable questions until someone listens. Sometimes that's enough to change everything. Here's what I learned. The moment you stop accepting what you know is wrong, you discover you had more power than you ever realized. And once you use that power to protect what matters most, you'll never be the same person who quietly took whatever they handed you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you around.